Greetings and welcome back to Room 303 and our discussion of what we call in Room 303 our Big Five. We are, of course, already into a couple of the lectures. I'm hopeful that you have already been exposed to the introductory set of comments, and then we just finished with the first of our Big Five, epistemology. That is to say, what can you know and how do you know it? And of course, we made the argument that it seems like most of the great works that we study together will involve some sense of epistemological fallibilism, as we said. That is to say, I think I'm right, but I could be wrong. Now, we love in 303 to say the following, and it's an ancient little Zen cone, but it does play a fun introduction to the ontological game that we're talking about now. I dreamed I was a butterfly, and then I awoke, and I wondered, am I a butterfly dreaming I'm a human? Now, the looks on some of your faces already tell me that you're ready to begin to consider that again. All right, I'll say it one more time. I dreamed I was a butterfly, and I awoke. I wondered, am I a butterfly dreaming I'm a human? Now, this, of course, little game, little riddle gets right to the heart of what we mean with our second of the Big Five, the question of ontology, of or related to the question of being, and by extension, values. All right? Now, the question really is, and it's a very old question, and it's foundational to our reading of a lot of the texts in 303 that we mess with. Who am I? And once I can kind of get beyond that question, I'm ready to ask about you. But for the time being, who am I? And the answer, typically, has come in maybe 3 or 4 different possible answers. One answer is, well, fundamentally, you're nothing but a physical body, and once you die, you're like the dog Rover, you're dead all over, okay? But there is a very interesting second observation. That is to say, it is true that I have a body, but I also have this thing that sometimes is going to be called mind, that allows me to recognize that I have a body. Well, this is mind, this is the brain working, but the obvious question is, well, like, what do you mean working? Like, how does the brain work? So, for example, if I cut open the top of your skull, we obviously could do this, we'll not do it in 303, and I were to look inside of your brain, will I see your mind? Well, no. Oh, so you don't have a mind. Well, I thought I had one till you started asking me stupid questions about butterflies and dreaming. No, I think I do have a mind. Of course, notice the irony. You have to posit the existence of a mind to argue there is no mind. Uh-oh. Now we're into some interesting places. Let's talk about ontology for a few moments. If the question is, who am I? Well, one obvious answer is I'm a body. No question, obviously. I mean, I say obviously. We'll even take the fallibilist position there. As a great thinker, Descartes, once argued, and of course for those of you who are familiar with the Matrix films, this idea has been played out many possible iterations. That is to say, maybe I'm just like in a brain in a vat or something, and I actually am not here at all, I'm not existing. Well, let's go ahead and just posit the possibility of your physical existence. But there seems to be something else of you. That is to say, there seems to be something called your mind, right? So, for sure, we have a body and we have a mind. I say for sure. It's using the fallibilist epistemological position. You see how these kind of start to go together as our Big Five. But wait, I feel like I'm selling Gingy knives or something up here. But wait, there's more. There's a whole school of thought that plays a very nasty game, and so I'll play it now with you, and you can decide how far you want to go down the quote-unquote butterfly trail or rabbit hole. And it runs something like this. Whatever you do right now, do not think about pink elephants. Don't do it. Don't do it. Of course, nasty, right? Because the moment that I make you, challenge you to not think about pink elephants, that's the one thing you're going to think about. Okay, but watch this for a moment. And this is kind of fascinating if you'll think about it. While you are thinking about pink elephants, you are, no question, a body with a brain. And that brain is certainly working, that is to say, your mind is thinking about pink elephants. But now all of a sudden, there's an interesting recognition that we can arrive at, and that is this. If your mind is what's thinking about pink elephants, even though maybe you don't want to, even though you've been told not to, now you're thinking about pink elephants, please stop. You have this interesting capacity to be aware that your mind is thinking about pink elephants. Now wait a minute. Allow for this finger to be the mind thinking about pink elephants, or if you wish, pink butterflies. Allow for this finger to represent whatever it is that's standing behind the mind, outside of the mind, aware that you are thinking about pink elephants. This obviously can't be the mind. The eyeball can't see itself. What is this capacity that stands outside of the mind, behind the mind, and is able to see the mind at work? I said see. Sometimes the word witness is used in different traditions. In other words, the capacity to be self-aware. You can be actually aware that you are a self, that which stands outside of the mind, working. Oh, good heavens, what are we going to call that? Well, again, the literatures are going to have any number of terms. Some will call it soul, some will call it spirit, some will call it consciousness. You can call it whatever you want to call it, but do notice that if you posit its existence, and it's awfully hard not to posit the fact that you were thinking about pink elephants and you were aware that you were thinking about pink elephants, or pink butterflies, then all of a sudden, who are you? The ontological question becomes not only a body, not only a mind, a brain at work, but something else as well, this consciousness thing. Now, notice, if we were to ask who you are, you could say, well, I'm one, body, I am a mind, two, I'm also, whoa, that is to say, I am, as St. Augustine loved to point out, three in one. That, of course, is the notion of Trinity, three in one. You can't remove one without the other. For example, if I remove your brain from your body, it will no longer allow for that mind to do the kinds of things that it's doing right now. Some of you will say being blown away. We'll say challenged. How's that? The ontological position then goes hand in hand, obviously, with the epistemological position to some degree. That's why they're the first two of our big five. In other words, when we look at a text, we will ask simply, what does this text have to say about what I can know? And then what does this text have to say about who I am? Notice how Shakespeare, for example, loves this tension, this perspective, this ontological perspective. I mean, think about Hamlet. There he is, on stage, all by himself, speaking to who? Himself. To be, or not to be. That is the question. Whether 'tis noble in mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, take up to see it troubles, and by opposing in them. He's having a conversation with himself about who he is. It is the ontological question. Shakespeare loves this. Think about Paradise Lost. And again, we've given full lectures on all these titles at learnstrong.net. Think about Milton and Paradise Lost and his Satan, who is having this conversation with himself. And he'll say it's better to reign in hell than serve in heaven. But you kind of get the sense that maybe he doesn't completely believe it. There's a little bit of doubt. And maybe even we would call it self-doubt engaged there. How about Longfellow's Psalm of Life? Tell me not in mournful numbers, life is but an empty dream. For the soul is dead that slumbers, and things are not what they seem. Life is real, life is earnest. And the grave is not its goal. Dust thou art to dust returnest. Was not spoken of the soul. I'm sorry. What happens to this capacity to be able to recognize that your mind is working? What happens to that when you finally have to leave the park and no longer get to swing and you have to go to the metaphoric van? Why, we all know that has to happen. That is to say, knowledge of our death is something that seems to be kind of unique to the human condition. Aristotle argues in Poetics that fundamentally there isn't much difference between you and your dog or your cat. That is to say, both are mammals. Both you and your dog, however, Aristotle argues in Poetics, can look at a sunset, but it's only one of the two of you who can appreciate that sunset if you can appreciate that sunset. We kind of got this sense that maybe a dog can't appreciate a sunset the way that you can. Aristotle argues in Poetics that when we are engaged in, especially watching a text, because he's writing about tragedy at the time, watching a performance like Oedipus Rex, That in fact we are capable of having that release of powerful emotions, catharsis, that involves fear and pity. Well, the fear, of course, is, man, what's happening to poor Oedipus could possibly happen to me. Is it possible, epistemologically, that I've been in a situation of absolute certainty, the way, of course, Oedipus is, only to discover I was completely wrong? Oh, great. That's fear. That could happen to me. Pity is, for Aristotle, what makes us somehow different from all the other mammals. Why? Because when I can take the perspective of you, ontologically speaking, I then can become humane. Human. That fundamental distinction for Aristotle is foundational. Now, if you'll think about it, in our analysis of Miller's Crucible, and we commented in our previous lectures, why not take Crucible as one of those classic texts that play around with epistemology and ontology and notice the tension between the two. Folks in that play are absolutely certain that what they're doing is right. But against that certainty is as well this ontological question of the value of human existence. Is it okay to destroy a person's life if you have this conviction, you're absolutely certain that they are possessed by some kind of demonic power? Well, that kind of tension leads us on to the next pairing of our big five: psychology, sociology. So come back and we'll be ready to mess around with the next pairing of our big five. Thank you.